Welcome to Theology Thursday, an ecumenical space for students to discuss matters of faith and theology.
I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
I am your co-host, Ryan Mock.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
It's the first episode of 2021, guys.
Woo!
We did it. And we are very close to episode 100. By the way, if you would like to join us at Maple Street Biscuit Company in Seminole, Florida for the 100th episode event, you got to go buy your tickets now. The link is in the thing. You have not a whole lot of time left. You got to go buy your tickets. It includes a t-shirt, a meal, and then you'll ask your question there in advance for us to do it at the live recording. We're super excited about that. It's going to be fantastic. Also, we just launched our Patreon. If you've missed that, that's open. So there's a few tiers, a $5, a $10, and a $15 a month tier. So either if you're $5 a month, you get a weekly after show. And then if you're at $10 a month, you get the weekly after show plus a monthly brand new podcast called Worship Wednesdays. And then if you're tier 3, $15 a month, you get all of that plus all of our merch. You'll get the t-shirt that we've just released, but you'll also get it. It's exclusive. This is only to Patreons and people coming to the 100th episode event. But then anytime in the future, if we release like a new hat or a new design of a t-shirt or whatever, it automatically gets shipped to you at no extra cost if you are a tier 3 Patreon. So, pretty cool. And it helps us, grow the show and improve the quality of what we're doing from a technical standpoint. So, if you feel led to do that in any way, it's certainly a blessing to us. Now, it's time for subpoints. The first subpoints of the new year. And I believe I'll start us off talking about something that probably everybody's seen by now because there are memes everywhere about this. And that would be Amen and all woman. So, look, if you haven't heard about this by now, there was a U.S. congressman who closed his prayer, an opening prayer at an event by saying Amen and a woman. Now, if you aren't aware, Amen has nothing to do with gender. It is a Hebrew and / English word that means so be it. So it's a declaration of agreement with something. So for him to add a woman at the end, kind of ridiculous. Now, this Congress member is an ordained United Methodist minister. So it's not like they just asked some random guy. They're like, "Oh, hey, could you pray?" And he didn't know what any of this meant. He's familiar with prayer and Christianity.
But he didn't really. It was a dad joke, right? He wasn't trying to be inclusive.
That's what this subpoint's about.
Oh,
no. Here's the thing. There's lots of great memes about it. You have the singer when Amen falls in love with a woman. And you have Anakin from Attack of the Clones, not just the Amen, but the woman and the children too. And it goes on and on. You have a Mandalorian and a woman DeLorean. There's just multiple memes going around about this. But here's where the meme starts to get a little scary. So Emmanuel Cleaver, who is the man who said Amen and a woman, got a lot of backlash about this over the past few weeks, and he decided to respond to this backlash.
Oh boy.
And I was very surprised because I thought maybe this was a silly mistake or an ill-timed dad joke, but rather this was extremely intentional, and he has come forward to defend himself.
Oh no.
Okay, so
you should have just said it was a joke, even if he did mean something by it. It was his chance to be like, "Oh, I was just kidding." That would be better than whatever this is going to be.
Yeah, he said that anybody who has criticized him saying Amen and a woman has proved themselves soiled by selfishness, perverted by prejudice, and unveiled by ideology.
What does that even mean?
The only thing I'm veiled with here is language. It's not... Amen is not a gendered word.
Right, it has nothing to do with that. And he claims that the "a woman" reference on Sunday was intended to recognize the record number of women serving in the new Congress. That's a great sentiment, But
The execution.
yeah.
Was,
Why didn't you just thank the Lord for representation of women in Congress?
Right. There was lots of other ways to do that. There was, say, congratulations for a record number of women in Congress, and you could have said, just like you said in your prayer, just thank you, Lord, for a record number of women. And you didn't have to say amen and a woman. Now, personally...
Unless you just wanted to make a joke.
Right. Now, personally, part of me wonders if this was a mistake or if he genuinely thought that amen had something to do with gender and that's why he did it, and he's just trying to justify it to cover his tracks, or if this was all extremely intentional and thought through and he really wanted to do this and is sticking by it.
It's fishy to me.
But now for everybody who has criticized him is prejudice.
yeah.
It doesn't even make sense.
I think it's humorous, and there's a
It's
lot of
very
great
funny.
memes to come of it.
Yeah,
So.
it's very funny.
And all of God's people said,
Ah,
woman. So, Ryan, you're next up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to... Last week... No, well, it wasn't last week. I don't know when exactly this released, but I
New Year's
mentioned...
Eve.
I
Or last
mentioned
week.
a book that I was in the process of reading, You Are What You Love by James K. Smith, and I just finished it. And I want to give it a recommend. I don't want to recommend it to you because I think it was a great book. It's about how our habits form us as human beings, and why it is important to have worship as a central part of your life, because our habits form our character, our virtue, and we are what we love. And that's the title of the book. But that's his thesis: is that as human beings, we're not primarily thinking things. We do think, I think, therefore I am. But primarily, we are loving beings. We love, and our hearts and our minds go towards what we love. And so our habits are indicators of what we love. And so as Christians, we need to have habits that are Christ-centered, so that we could be formed in love and in truth. And part of that is worship. And so he makes a strong case in his book about that. He also makes a strong case for high liturgy, but that's probably a discussion for a different time. But it was a very good book because it helped me process some things I was already thinking, but putting it into words. So I would recommend that. You Are What You Love by James K.A. Smith. Very good. That's it. That's all I have
I just
to say.
added it to my want-to-read list on Apple Books.
Good. That's good, Connor. I hope you enjoy.
I will. Hey, Johnny.
So, I watched the movie Soul,
I watched that movie, too.
I did also.
and now I'm a transcendentalist.
Nice.
No, I'm just kidding.
So basically, this episode is a warning to everybody. Do not watch Soul or you'll probably leave the faith.
No, it certainly is not a very theological movie, but it was, I don't want to give spoilers away, but it was a good movie it had some good themes.
Yeah, I honestly, I viewed the film more as, it seemed to me as though its aim was more meant to be philosophical rather than theological, as far as the points that it was trying to get across.
I don't think it was trying to push a worldview on us.
No. I think the ultimate message that it had, without spoiling too much, was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically it was just trying to communicate that, like, while purpose is important, we don't want to get so caught up in it that we miss out on life, And I think it was about appreciating the blessings that you have and appreciating the life that you have.
Well, and here's what I'll say. There's a particular scene in the movie that kind of drives this point home, and it involves a piano. So I'm just going to say that so I don't spoil it. But if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's the scene that made you cry, as every Pixar movie has one, especially Cars 2.
Oh my goodness.
But, no, this particular scene I actually thought had such a powerful point that actually very much does line up with some points of theology that I've talked about here several times when it comes to our God-given purpose and design. Because I think a lot of times we try to separate, the spiritual and the natural, and these seemingly mundane things get brushed off to the side, even though these day-to-day things that we do, spending time with people, enjoying God's creation, sharing a meal, like, that's part of God's design for man, and these are things that we'll get to do in eternity. The difference is we won't have sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we have to look forward to, and we'll be fully in God's presence. But the point being is, oftentimes Christians look for this grander purpose to latch onto, not realizing that even in the day-to-day simple parts of our life, that's God's design for us, and it pleases Him. Mm-hmm. And so, honestly, I thought that that message was put forth beautifully, and it's something that Christians need, and when you put that in the context of Christian doctrine, and eternity, it really does elevate.
Absolutely. In the context of Christian doctrine, it's to say that life is meaningful, it takes on another form under Christianity, to say that life is meaningful and that the things that we do every day have eternal value, because that was kind of the point of the movie. It's like, I don't know, you can compare it. It's not separate. You're absolutely right. Sometimes we're like, we gotta think about the higher meaning, like it's evacuation theology. We gotta get out of here and jump into heaven. We gotta get out of here and jump to the next best thing, right? And but in reality, like, it's happening now. God's kingdom is happening now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was kind of the point of the movie, is that his life was happening now. And it wasn't like he was trying to get to his life. I want my life to begin.
Yeah. And I think it's easily... Here's the thing. I think the movie was intentionally done in a way that it's applicable to any worldview. Right. But I think it's very easily applicable to a Christian worldview. Right. The ultimate message. So, anyway, yeah, it's a good movie. You should watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a cat in it.
Also, your soul looks like a blue blob of yourself.
It's pretty cute.
Yes.
Your soul is very cute. That's the moral of the story.
You have a cute soul. Joel Osteen. So, moving on to our main topic. All right, so this isn't addressing a specific question, but recently we had an episode where we talked about a number of different things, and ultimately it led to brief conversation about creation and creationism and some of these things, and Johnny was like, hey, we should do a whole episode on that. So now we're doing it. Go ahead, Johnny.
Okay, well, here we go. Yeah, so I have a little bit of a beef with the whole pushing 7-day young earth creationism as essential to the faith. That bothers me. Mm-hmm. Does that bother you, boys?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm bothered now. You just got me all heated.
I'm bothered by the fact that you would say that, and you're a heretic.
So let me preface this whole thing saying, like, I'm weird, and you guys know that already. But
thank you for the preface.
We don't need a whole episode for that, Johnny.
I'm not convinced of the old Earth narrative. I'm not convinced of the young Earth narrative. I think in essence I am, for all intents and purposes, a 7-day creationist, but I'll kind of explain what that means in context of the Hebrew Bible. So I guess I'm a Middle Earth creationist. I'm not creating a new thing here. But I think the point is, you have these things that are all about answers and having all the answers, and we don't have all the answers. And I'm going to kind of demonstrate, I hope, during the course of this podcast, that both in the fields of academia and in Christianity, there is a temptation to use an ulterior motive to make a point, and in doing so, you present things as facts that aren't facts. Mm-hmm. And I can explain that further. But here's the real problem: what is Genesis 1 about? Right. What's your point blank answer to that question?
God made the universe.
Wrong.
What?
Connor, what is Genesis 1 about?
Get him!
I like him.
No, okay, so the theme that's flowing through the Hebrew text is this idea of, and if you read a guide, and you can read several different scholars, and I've read a lot of scholarship on this, but John Walton is a good one. to look at. But if you look at the original Hebrew text, it's all about God bringing chaos into order. And if you look at the order of things, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to talk about how God ordered systems. And so it's really about how God formed the systems that we see on earth. Land and water, creatures, those kinds of things, right? Yeah. He's bringing chaos and he's bringing it into order. That is the central theme of Genesis 1. The book also functioned, and God must have inspired whoever the author was. We believe it was probably Moses, but inspired the author to also write in contrast to the other creation narratives that were kind of bubbling up around the area. So, for example, it talks about how God made the stars, right? And divided the light into stars. And then it just keeps going. Mm-hmm. Well, the other nations around them deified the stars. And so by doing that, they were making a statement. The creation's not supposed to be worshipped, but the creator, you know. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of de-emphasizes the actual act of creation and emphasizes the creator very, very intentionally in the book. So it's about Yahweh, it's about God, and about his ability to order chaos into beauty and non-chaos.
So are you telling me that Genesis 1 is not to be read as a science textbook?
Well, that's very important as well. It's not a science textbook.
Well, none of the Bible's meant to be read as a science textbook.
Right. Most Old Testament scholars agree that the Hebrew word of like the day is a 24-hour period. It's hard to get around that. But the Bible doesn't tell us if time transpires between the ordering of the days. And when we consider that Genesis doesn't tell us how the earth is physically created, it just doesn't. Just as God spoke it into being, that he was the one behind it. Yeah. The 7 days, it came into order by God's design and authority. Like, we have a lot of possibilities about when they occurred. Time may have transpired between them, and then, boom, God brought that into order. And then time transpired, and he brought that chaos into order. We really don't know. Again, the Hebrew text gives us a lot of possibilities because, as Ryan pointed out, it is an ancient Near Eastern text, not a textbook. You know, yeah. It's about God. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
So the reason Genesis doesn't give us these details is because it's not what it's about. Mm-hmm. And so there's a danger when you start to try to give credence to a book that Jesus has already given credence to when he said not one iota of the law or the prophets is going to disappear. You know, he gave credence to the Torah. We're trying to do it in our own way, I think sometimes even in the flesh, and it's led to a lot of problems. And that leads me to my proposal about this.
Is this your thesis statement right here?
Kind
about
of.
To give us.
Kind of. And this isn't like a really broad overview of all of the views. I probably should have put that together. But I think generally speaking, there's all kinds of stuff in between. But just to give you a broader picture, there's the young Earth view, which believes that the Earth is very, very young. If you are extremely rigid in the fundamentalist camp, I think it's about 5,000 or 6,000 years old. Mm-hmm. It's very, very young. And, you know, it was 7 consecutive days back to back. And you can scientifically prove that. You can't. You cannot scientifically prove that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I may get a lot of hate for that. But that's what they're saying. And I think that's why it bothers me. But we have this problem in secularism too. And I'll explain. Academia and fundamentalist young earth creationists both present facts as facts that aren't definitively facts to support their biases. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm
following what you're saying.
So rejecting evolutionary theory, or scientific proposals about the age of the Earth, does not equal rejecting mainstream science altogether. And this also works in reverse. In principle, I don't throw out mainstream science. That doesn't mean I feel I have enough theoretical information to accept evolution or a very specific age of the Earth. or even the universe. Doesn't mean I feel like I have enough evidence at my disposal. It doesn't mean that I reject science. Okay, so this was the main point of like a documentary that came out about intelligent design. It's called Ben Stein. Well, it's not called Ben Stein, but it was done by Ben Stein.
I love Ben Stein. It's a great movie.
It was called Expelled. And basically, he was chronicling the fact that there were all these teachers coming forward saying, well, you know, since this is theoretical, and the people at the top in academia are like, whoa, 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 theoretical? No, we teach evolution as fact here. And they were like, whoa, no, it's theoretical. And because it's theoretical, I was just thinking maybe there was some, not even God, but just some kind of interference so that the probability is better in like an evolutionary process or something like that, some kind of intelligent interference so that it's not just a slot machine. And they're like, what if that's the case? And they're like, no, it's just the evolution, it's Darwinism, it's
right.
Take it as fact. And that's just as intellectually dishonest as saying we can scientifically prove that the Earth was created in 7 consecutive days. So academia is increasingly becoming unkind to people who treat theoretical sciences as theoretical, and it's because it challenges the majority worldview within that.
And can I say, I do think the reason a lot of hardcore, staunch, young Earth, 7-day creationism has emerged, I do think is in some sense reactionary to that.
Right.
To teaching evolution as fact.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't agree with.
Right.
That's wrong. We shouldn't be, because that is imposing a theoretical, like, worldview interpretation of things onto students as fact. That's completely wrong. I don't think that they should know. I still think students should learn it.
Yeah.
But they should know that it's a theory. You know,
Yeah.
They should know that even Darwin knew that it was a theory. You know, he never claimed this to be scientific fact. In the same way that I think as we teach, you know, these ideas about creationism and all these things, that this is a theory. Now, also, I'm gonna throw my hat out there. I am a 7-day young Earth creation. I don't like using those labels because of everything that comes with it, but that is kind of where I lean. That's what I personally believe, because I think that's where the evidence leans heavily. But at the end of the day, I was not there. There is no way to 100% prove what I believe. I lean that way, but at the end of the day, what matters is that God created the earth. It was perfect. And man brought sin into it. However many years it took for all that to happen doesn't really change the gospel. And that's the problem, is that this was kind of in reaction to what was happening in the education system. These things came up, but it started to alienate a lot of Christians who maybe did believe in evolution and now are being told that their salvation was at stake because of it. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And here's the hot take, and I don't know, cancel me, but, you know, Ken Ham's whole thing is answers in Genesis. Well, the answers to the questions he asks are not in Genesis, because that's not what the book is about. And it drives me crazy to no end, because I really love studying the Hebrew Bible and the Torah, and it's just crazy. But you're right, it was a reaction. But again, it's hard to claim that this is biblical or important to biblical doctrine when it's just reaction to spillover, you know, to academia.
And I'd like to add real quick, to throw my hat out on the table, because everybody else has. I'm an old Earth creationist, yet I lean towards theistic evolution. I am sympathetic towards the position, and I could probably be convinced of it if somebody really sat down and talked to me about it. I want to make clear to people that theistic evolution is not opposed to Christianity. You could be a Christian and believe in evolution. A big example I'll give you is Timothy Keller, a well-known pastor and preacher today. He is a theistic evolutionist. I think we put too much stock in this, right?
Yeah.
On the fundamentalist side, on the 24 hours, 6 days the world was created. I wouldn't want anybody to feel like my salvation is at stake because I believe in evolution. How the earth was created it's not in the Apostles' Creed. It's not in the Nicene Creed. And I'll also add this. The early church had many very different opinions on this. Actually, in fact, many of the early church fathers, particularly I'd point to Augustine, believed that Genesis 1 was allegorical. That's how it should be interpreted, as an allegory. And many of the church fathers had that hermeneutic for interpreting the much of the Old Testament. It's an allegory. I would still consider them Christians. I don't think we should throw that out. It's something worth considering. And so this whole idea of 6-day, 24-hour day creation, the earth is 6,000 years old. In church history, it's a relatively new idea. So let's not put too much stock in it. You could believe in either and be a Christian.
Yeah, no, and a couple things I'd add to that. I mean, the Lutheran Church actually funded most of Darwin's research. There were times when, this was just very different in the church. Like you said, it's a recent development for that to be kind of the prominent Christian view, but also I understand why some people get concerned about the interpreting Genesis 1 as allegorical, because the thing that people always say is, well, if we decide that that's an allegory and that's literal, well, now we're just picking and choosing. And my response to that would be, okay, you can't just pick and choose which parts of the Bible are literal and allegorical, but there are ways to study based on the type of literature, the way it's written, the context in which it's written, to figure out which parts of the Bible are literal and allegorical. There are actually ways to do this in the book of Revelation. We've talked about that before.
Yes.
So you can't just pick and choose willy-nilly, but if you're taking the time to study and somebody maybe leans towards that or is sympathetic towards that view, that doesn't mean they're going to hell.
Right. Yeah.
But you do have to be careful with that, because you can't just start going and being like, this passage is literal, but that one, because I don't like that one. You can't do that.
The key to biblical interpretation, and I'm sure we've said this before, is we interpret the Bible literally in the sense we interpret it as the author of the Bible wanted it to be interpreted. So when we come to poetry, we interpret poetry as poetry, not literal. If we look at Genesis 1, I'll give you just a quick example. If we were to take Genesis 1 literally, by the words literally, then we would have to believe that the sky is a dome. Because that word, I don't have the Hebrew word right in front of me, but the Hebrew word, the connotation there is actually of rock, of a dome. And so that's how...
So the earth is flat.
So the earth is flat, and we have a dome over us. And so, obviously, I don't believe that the earth is flat, and I don't believe there's a dome over us. So, obviously, there's something off there. We shouldn't interpret that literally. And so...
Right. Well, just one last quick thought. The point is not that we're trying to convince you one way or the other. What we're saying is that this is not a salvation issue. Tim Keller advocates for evolution. I do not. I still have great respect for Tim Keller, and he's one of my favorite living authors. Now, a lot of people canceled him simply because of the theistic evolution thing. Everything he said we're going to throw out now. I'm not going to do that because I know that it's not a salvation issue. It's not an Orthodox Christianity issue.
Yeah. I'm certainly not convinced of theistic evolution at this point, but I do hate making it an essential, because if Ken Ham's stuff could be, and I hate to use him, but he's just the most hardcore fundamentalist we've got right now in this camp. But if something came out that just definitively, here it is, physically, you can see it, proved, all of that stuff kind of falls apart, would we just throw out the entire Bible and just be like, oh crap, we missed it, we don't get it? Would that affect our salvation? Would that affect our faith? And I would argue that it shouldn't. And, I think we read Genesis literally, like you said, the way that
the author intended
it. And what's the meaning behind it? Okay, we know that the earth is not a dome, but or that the sky is not a dome, a rocky dome or whatever. But we do know that the author was trying to communicate that the earth was formless, that we still there was still work to do. So I don't know. You can always dig down deeper and get to a literal thing. I think that there's so much Genesis doesn't give us.
Yeah. And what's interesting? I think all three of us kind of have varying opinions on how the earth was created, how old the earth is. But none of us get our opinions from Genesis 1.
Right.
Because we all see that Genesis 1 is not a science textbook. It's not to be interpreted as such. We view Genesis 1, even though we all have varying opinions on how old the earth is or whatnot, we believe that primarily Genesis 1 is a theological treatise, teaching us something about God.
And who he is. So, this is more of an unknown than we like to admit. And that's really the point here. Whether you're a secularist who's trying to, even if you're subversively doing it, it happens, trying to defend atheism, and all of a sudden your science gets skewed by your worldview, even if you're an atheist. And that's one of the things that Expelled reveals, that, we getting on Ken Ham for doing it with, Genesis, but it's done all the time in the academic community with evolution, and then we don't get a real good picture of what that theory actually is. Right. Here's the thing. The whole movement to teach our kids young earth or nothing, right? The young earth is the only way to read the Bible, came about because they saw it as like a fundamental, like during the Scopes monkey trial and some of those things. They saw it as a fundamental reason we're losing their kids. Okay, we're losing our kids to evolutionary theory. I'm going to give a hot take here. They're wrong. Biblical illiteracy is what pulls the rug out from under our kids.
Ooh.
Okay. Genesis is not about the earth being 5,000 years old, or even the origin of species. So some of these attempts to convince the church to define things we can't actually perpetuates biblical illiteracy that leads to kids walking away. Because what we're doing, and Answers in Genesis is guilty of this, and I hate that I normally don't call out like one organization and just be like,
ooh, Johnny's really getting heated then. He's calling people out.
But I was given the curriculum one time to teach kids. I'm like, I can't teach them this. Because here's the thing. I don't know that it's completely true, that the earth is exactly 5,000 years old, and there's a lesson where you have a birthday for the earth, and you color the candles, which say 5,000 on top of the cake.
So they have an Earth Day too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just like, so what happens if they get to school? I've just told them, this is essential to your faith. And then they get to college, and somebody says, that's not true, and they believe them, then they think that their faith is somehow attacked.
It's just like Santa Claus.
Okay.
Well, and the example, and we've talked about this before, is this is a part of Rhett and Link's story.
Right.
When they left the faith, one of the first things that they were confronted with is the creation debate,
If you allow, and again, it's about being firm but room to breathe. The best analogy I got from, I was sitting on the Tom Stewart Causeway Bridge, which is a local bridge here. I'm sitting there, and it's dead stop traffic. It's shaking a little bit, and I'm like, this is kind of a flimsy bridge. And my wife, who's an architect, she goes, it's actually a really strong bridge, because you need a bridge to give a little bit in the right places so that the weight is distributed evenly across the bridge. If it doesn't move, it's more likely to crumble. And I thought it was such a great picture of this, because it's firm, it's a bridge. Like, it's going to stay up, and then we're going to go across it, but at the same time, it's got room to breathe. You know what I mean? And that's what we need for our kids. We do need a solid foundation. I'm not saying, I'm not a secularist. I mean, theologically, I'm conservative. I don't believe in theistic evolution. I'm for the most part, I'm theologically conservative. But I know that these things are not essential, and that we can explore the origin of species outside of Genesis, because those things really exist outside of Genesis. That's the sphere we're supposed to explore those things. And so I actually think that this whole thing of trying to get our kids to believe an exact doctrine of creation that is not in the Bible is actually making the problem worse when it comes to kids walking away. And so I just think that leaving it open is better. So I think secular and Christian thinkers alike have done a disservice by forsaking intellectual honesty and peddling facts as facts, peddling evolutionary theory as fact, peddling young earth as fact. It's all theoretical. It's all theoretical science. We're still trying to figure it out. And I think we need to get back to theoretical language. Listen, there are a lot of things with the young earth view that I'm convinced of, but if I discuss it with my students, for example, I have a student who is, by the way, still walking with the Lord, even as he explores these different things. I always say the reason I think evolution is unlikely is because ... Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's honest language. That's called intellectual honesty. The reason I think evolution is unlikely, or the reason I think a young Earth is likely ... Right? We're all just making educated guesses, and we need to be humble enough to own that and not make the Bible do something it was not meant to do, and miss out on a beautiful Hebrew prose about how God brought all of this that we see into order and will one day restore it in its perfect form, I don't want to belabor the point, but I did take an excerpt from my Zondervan commentary that I thought was really good. Or sorry, this is Nelson's. Sorry, Nelson's. I lumped you with Zondervan. It says, of course these two chapters are not written in terms of modern science, but neither are they written in what would have passed for science in the ancient times. If the Bible had been written in the scientific language of its day, it would have been little more than a relic today. Had it been written in the scientific language of the Middle Ages, it would have been a mystery to its readers and nonsense to us. Had it been written in scientific language of our own day, it would have been unintelligible to prior generations and, to be sure, a relic in future years. These first chapters of Genesis reveal God's identity as creator in language that makes sense to every sort of audience. The chapters spoke to the first people on the move at the dawn of Hebrew history. Over the ages, they have spoken to ancient and medieval peoples, and today they speak to people from all backgrounds. The modern person sometimes wonders why the language is not more precise. Yet these chapters do not aim at precision. Their aim is clarity concerning one certain truth. God created the heavens and the earth.
I like that.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good summary of kind of what we've discussed here today.
Yeah. Well, look. So I just want to throw in just kind of some resources for further study. If you are interested in this kind of thing, because there's some people in my life who I really respect, like my grandfather and my wife, who are much smarter than me, who have talked to me about, creationism and some of these things. And while for them it's certainly not the reason that they're saved, there's certain things that they've learned about science and the Bible that have strengthened their faith and that have been encouraging them. So if you're really into science, here's some resources I want to recommend to you. Because one of the most prominent ones out there is, and we bashed it multiple times today, is Answers in Genesis. Here's the thing. A lot of people might remember the Ken Ham-Bill Nye debate. It was pitiful. It was really... Because Ken Ham has a bachelor's degree in science. That's all he has. Everybody that works at Answers in Genesis is more educated than he is. So he's kind of this mascot for this organization, but when that happened, it was really embarrassing. I mean, it was... Thankfully, Ken Ham doesn't represent me, but it was just...
Yeah.
I remember watching it in school, going to a private Christian school, and I'm just like... He just kept saying, well, there's a book, there's a Bible. He didn't have any answers to any of Bill Nye's questions. And all that being said, that's not, I think, a great resource to go to for, solid scientific study from a Christian worldview. What I would recommend, however, is the Institute for Creation Research. Now, that still sounds like hardcore Seventh-day Creationists, and they do call themselves creationists, but that's not Institute for Creation Research. They're saying anything that we're researching scientifically is God's creation. So it's not just about, Genesis 1 or anything like that, whereas Answers in Genesis is literally called Answers in Genesis, as if that's where we get all of our scientific answers.
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying.
Yeah.
One is very theoretical, and one is very...
So I'm actually recommending, not everything, because I haven't seen or heard everything they've done, but I am recommending Institute for Creation Research as a resource if you want to study science from a Christian worldview. They do have a lot of good resources. Everybody on their staff, the one I'm most familiar with is Dr. Jason Lyle, but they all have PhDs from secular universities and in science, and these are smart people, okay? And some of the lectures I've seen, I didn't even fully understand, but they had to do with math, and they had to do with all these different things and how they see God's beauty in these things. Now, that is a worthwhile pursuit, okay? If that's what you're... Now, for me, I don't know that much about science and math, so I don't appreciate it as much. But when I hear my grandfather and my wife talking to each other about these things, or my wife explaining some of these things, and I see how it strengthened their faith, and they see God's design and beauty in those things, that's great. Idolizing a certain interpretation of one chapter of the Bible is not. So I say all that to say that as a Christian, you can still study science and see God in those things, and it be a really beautiful experience. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's a resource you can go check out. Again, our link to our Patreon if you want to join in supporting us, and the link to buy tickets for Theology Thursday 100 are right there in the link. And if you have any questions you want us to answer, you can send them to us at theologythursdaypodcast@gmail.com. Or you can message us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
What are our handles for that? Is that just Theology at Theology?
Twitter is TPod. I don't remember.
Link in the show notes.
And then Instagram is Theology Thursday Podcast, and Facebook is Theology Thursday Podcast. Twitter, I had to shorten it because it wouldn't let me.
Ooh.
They got those small little handles there. So check it all out, and we look forward to joining you again for another episode of Theology Thursday next week. Ryan?
Amen and Awoman and Yayit.